Hello, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the headlines. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains tense as a ceasefire remains elusive. US President Donald Trump visits Texas after flash floods killed 120 people. A preliminary report says that cut-off fuel switches have led to the Air India crash that killed 260 people. Hopes for a Gaza ceasefire are rapidly fading as talks between Israel and Hamas in Qatar appear close to collapse. Negotiations in Qatar have stalled, with Palestinian officials accusing Israel of using Prime Minister Netanyahu's US visit to delay progress. They claim the Israeli delegation in Doha lacked authority to make meaningful decisions on key issues like troop withdrawal and aid delivery. Netanyahu, however, maintained a positive tone before leaving Washington, saying a deal could be finalised within days.
A choice. You have a choice.
The World Food Programme is sounding the alarm over an unfolding humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, with food stocks ready but blocked at the border. Aid officials say access not supply is the critical challenge. Their message is clear. Without a ceasefire, the situation could spiral beyond control.
The World Food Programme says Gaza is on the brink of mass famine, with 1 in 3 people going days without eating. Briefing reporters in New York, Deputy Executive Director Carl Scow painted a dire picture following his recent visit to the Strip. According to him, over 500,000 people already facing starvation. Malnutrition, he warned, is surging rapidly.
We had a formal IPC report a few weeks ago already, pointing to the entire population being acutely food insecure and 500,000 people in starvation. And since then, certainly, it hasn't gotten better. If anything, it's much worse now. Malnutrition is surging. You might have seen the numbers from UNICEF, 90,000 children now in urgent need of treatment for malnutrition.
Scow described a population in constant flight, with families forced to relocate 20 to 30 times, carrying less each time and losing the ability to survive. He stressed that the World Food Programme has enough food at Gaza's borders to feed the entire population for 2 months, but that access remains severely limited. Scow detailed long delays at checkpoints, fuel shortages, damaged armoured vehicles, and broken communications, leaving teams stranded for hours.
The operating environment also for our teams is just impossible. Some 85% now of the territory, there is active military operations. Our teams get stuck in waiting for clearances and at checkpoints, often spending between 15 to 20 hours straight in their armed vehicles, trying to escort our convoys. There is not enough fuel, there is not enough spare parts to our vehicles. Most of the windows in our armored vehicles have been damaged, and we don't have basic communication. Radio antennas from our cars have been ripped off.
The World Food Programme official said WFP is in contact with Israeli authorities, and though some agreements have been reached, implementation is falling short. The agency is again urging for an immediate ceasefire and secure humanitarian access before the crisis escalates even further.
Iran's foreign minister has warned Europe that any move to reimpose UN sanctions would end its role in nuclear negotiations. In an interview with Le Monde, Abbas Araghchi also ruled out missile talks and called for condemnation of attacks on Iran's nuclear sites. Our Iran correspondent, Turaj Shiraliliu, reports from Tehran.
Foreign Minister Araghchi said to prove that Europe is independent and impartial, it shall condemn the June attacks on Iran's nuclear sites under UN safeguards, and also refrain from threatening Iran about reactivation of the nuclear sanctions by the world body. In an interview with the Paris-based Le Monde newspaper, he said, if the snapback of sanctions, also known as the trigger mechanism, is activated, it will terminate EU's role in Iran's peaceful nuclear program talks. Araqchi was warning about the threat by the European Troika of France, Germany and the UK as signatories of the 2015 nuclear agreement to apply for the return of sanctions at UN in October if Iran is found of non-compliance of its obligations. Asked about Tehran's relations with the International Atomic Energy Agency after Iran suspended its ties with the UN watchdog in the wake of the agency's failure to condemn the US-Israeli attacks, he said, Iran has complied with its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Also, replying to a question about renewed Iran-US talks, he set out Tehran's conditions and added, it must be guaranteed that in the future, during negotiations, the US does not launch military attacks. Prior to the 12-day war which Israel waged on 13th June, Iran and US were scheduled to meet for the 6th time indirectly in Muscat, Oman on 15th June to discuss Iran's alternative proposal to a US draft. Later, on 22nd June, US became a party to the war and joined Israel by bombing Iran's 3 major sites under IAEA monitoring. In the interview with Le Monde, Araqchi also categorically ruled out negotiations on Iran's ballistic missile program, which he described as deterrent and defensive. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
President Trump says a new agreement is in place between the US, NATO and Ukraine over the supply of American weapons. Speaking to NBC News, he claimed NATO will now cover the full cost of US arms, which will then be routed to Ukraine through the alliance. The deal, according to Trump, was finalised at the NATO summit in the Netherlands this June. In January, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte had proposed that European allies purchase US weapons for Ukraine, a concept that now appears to be moving forward. US President Donald Trump has visited Texas to survey the damage caused by floods on the 4th of July that killed 120 people. The US President praised first responders for their rescue efforts.
US President Donald Trump, accompanied by First Lady Melania Trump, visited Texas to survey the devastation caused by flash flooding and to meet with local officials, first responders, and relatives of some of the 120 people killed in the July 4th disaster. Torrential rains sent a wall of water surging down the Guadalupe River in the early hours of Independence Day, making it the deadliest disaster of Trump's nearly 6-month term.
I've never seen anything like it. I've seen a lot of bad ones. I've gone to a lot of hurricanes, a lot of tornadoes. I've never seen anything like this. This is a bad one. We just visited with incredible families that, I mean, look, they've been devastated. They lost their child or 2 children, and just hard to believe what, I've never seen anything like it. A little narrow river that becomes a monster, and that's what happened.
Search teams continue to comb through muddy debris in central Texas for the dozens still missing. No survivors have been found since the day of the floods. Among the dead are at least 36 children, many of them campers at Camp Mystic, a nearly century-old Christian all-girls summer retreat along the riverbanks.
My deepest sympathy to all of the parents who lost beautiful young souls. Deepest sympathy from all of us, to the community, to everybody who lost a loved one. We are grieving with you. Our nation is grieving with you. We just met with the wonderful families. We pray with them, we hug, we hold hands. They shared the stories, and I met beautiful young ladies. They gave me this special bracelet from the camp in honor of all of the little girls that they lost their lives. So we are here to honor them and also to give the support, help, and I will be back. I promise to them, and I just pray for them and giving them my strength and love.
Trump's visit comes amid growing questions over the government's response to the disaster, with hopes of finding more survivors nearly extinguished. Meanwhile, he praised first responders for their rescue efforts and defended government's disaster response.
Investigators under India's Civil Aviation Ministry have released a preliminary report which reveals cockpit confusion about the plane's fuel switch moments before the fatal Air India crash last month.
A preliminary report by Indian aviation accident investigators reveals cockpit confusion moments before the fatal Air India crash that killed 260 people in Ahmedabad last month. The report indicates that the plane's engine fuel switches shifted from run to cut-off within seconds of each other, starving both engines of fuel. The agency leading the probe, which operates under India's Civil Aviation Ministry, is investigating what has become the world's deadliest aviation disaster in a decade. Investigators are focusing on the movement of the engine fuel control switches, based on analysis of the Boeing 787's flight and voice data recorders, as well as a simulation by Boeing of the aircraft's final moments. In the moments before the crash, one pilot can be heard on the cockpit voice recorder asking the other why he had cut off the fuel. The second pilot responded that he had not done so, according to the report. CCTV footage shows that almost immediately after takeoff, a backup power source known as a ram air turbine deployed, an indication that the engines had lost power. The report suggests neither Boeing nor engine maker GE bear responsibility for the crash. Air India acknowledged the findings in a statement, saying it is cooperating fully with Indian authorities, but declined to comment further.
PKK fighters have begun laying down arms in northern Iraq, marking what could be a turning point in their decades-long conflict with Turkey. In a rare and symbolic moment, fighters from the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party were seen burning their weapons during a disarmament ceremony near Suleimania in northern Iraq. The move comes as part of the group's decision to end arms operations after more than 4 decades of insurgency against Turkey. The handover process could take several months. Ankara, however, says clashes are still ongoing and continues targeting PKK sites in the region. Tensions between Georgia and the EU are escalating again, this time over the upcoming local elections. The Parliament Speaker accuses Brussels of trying to disrupt the vote. Here's our Georgia correspondent, Nini Nikolashvili, with more details.
12 weeks ahead of Georgia's local elections, the Speaker of Parliament, Shalva Papashvili, is accusing the European Union of political interference. In a sharply worded post, he claimed that the European Parliament's July 9 resolution is nothing less than an attempt to disrupt the election process in Georgia. The resolution adopted in Strasbourg calls on opposition parties in Georgia to consider boycotting upcoming vote. It was supported by the European Commissioner Marta Kos and the member of European Parliament Rasa Yuknevichna, who authored the text. But in Tbilisi, this message was received very differently. Abashvili described this as the first direct interference by Brussels in current election cycle, suggesting it's aimed at destabilizing the process and ultimately denies Georgian citizens their right to vote. The statement fits into a growing pattern of anti-Brussels rhetoric from the ruling Georgian Dream Party. It comes just weeks after the European Union criticized Georgia for adopting a controversial foreign agents law and just months before a key test of Georgia's democratic credibility. As the tensions between Tbilisi and Brussels is getting colder, the stakes of the upcoming local elections and the narratives around it is just getting higher. It's Nini Nikolashvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
Previously on Inside Politics, our Anastasia Levrina discussed the meeting between President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan in Abu Dhabi with energy security specialist John Roberts. John explained what Azerbaijan can offer Armenia and how both countries could help each other.
I don't think there's much in terms of energy connections that will change. The international routes for getting oil and gas out of Azerbaijan to commercial markets via Georgia and Turkey are well established. and the sheer cost of building, for instance, new oil or gas lines through Armenia, even though they would be shorter, make little point at this stage. But there is something in energy that I think is worthwhile. If there is peace, then both Armenia and Azerbaijan become better places in which to invest. Now, from an Azerbaijani perspective, one of the issues is that their oil is at best at plateau and more probably actually in a state of decline. So that means you need fresh investment in the exploration and production of prospects that have already been identified but not yet drilled. So a company like Exxon would naturally be interested. It has had long ties and involvement in Azerbaijani energy, but I think it's a kind of marginal investment that just gets that little bit better at a time of peace. With regard to Armenia, the real question is, what do you do about the nuclear reactor? At what point do you start getting a replacement for that reactor? And at what point do you start thinking, what kind of energy can Armenia produce? And the slightly smaller but still interesting perspective that 15 years ago or so, the deputy foreign ministers of both Armenia and Azerbaijan said that if there were to be peace, then they would be happy for Azerbaijani oil and gas to go into Armenia, and Armenia's deputy foreign minister said they'd be happy to receive it.
As part of broader efforts to reintegrate Afghanistan into its regional neighbourhood after years of isolation, the government in Kabul is actively engaging with surrounding states, with more countries than ever now willing to explore constructive ties. Connectivity and trade remain the central pillars of this renewed outreach, as reflected in a recent meeting between Afghanistan's acting Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs, Abdul Ghani Baradar, and Kazakhstan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, Murat Nurtlev from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, long considered a central actor in the region, is emerging as one of the key enablers of Afghanistan's gradual re-entry into multilateral frameworks, both through political engagement and infrastructure development aimed at job creation and long-term stabilization. The two sides signed a memorandum of understanding on the fundamental principles of construction and operation of the connectivity of Central Asia and South Asia Railway. Joining us now to discuss the latest agreement and its likely ramifications is Nurbolat Nishanbayev. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Now, what's the current level of trade between Afghanistan and Kazakhstan, and how is this railway expected to enhance it?
Surely, right now, both sides, they want to increase $3 billion per year, the trade volume between Kazakhstan and Afghanistan. To be honest, Afghanistan has a great potential for Central Asia. So therefore, Kazakhstani side are trying to create railroads connecting Kazakhstan and Afghanistan by Turkmenistan. Because for Central Asian countries, Afghanistan's potential is very important, connecting with the Southern Asian countries. So therefore, I think it has a strategic meaning for both sides. So increasing the trade volume between Kazakhstan and Afghanistan, for longer term, it will create kind of strategic logistical hub which is connecting Central and Southern Asia for the long term. But however, in the last few years, we have realized that Afghanistan is opening up. Regardless, still they are living under sanctions. But anyhow, the geographical location, logistical aspect is very important for the wider region in terms of connectivity, in terms of moving of goods for the Eurasian continent as a whole.
And how do you, I'm looking for elaboration here, how do you situate this initiative within the broader map of regional railway integration?
Definitely, because in Kazakhstan, in the last few years, we have seen the rise of new connectivity between east to the west. Now we see from north to the south. So this is a new direction, Afghanistan in the southern part of Kazakhstan. So it will expand our region in terms of also offers new initiatives, new partnership to the southern part of the Asian continent, which had been for the long time underdeveloped, but it has been away from the innovation. So therefore it has a great potential.
Okay. And lastly, given the unresolved issue of full international recognition of the current government, how feasible is it to fully integrate Afghanistan into regional economic structures?
It's a matter of discussion, to be honest, because still by many countries, Afghanistan, the Taliban regime is considered as a terrorist organization. Even in Kazakhstan last year, they were considered as a legal powers authority in Afghanistan. In Russia, also they remove it from the terrorist organization list. But I think it depends on not international organizations, but it depends on the Afghanistan itself. To what extent they follow humanitarian aspects, to what extent they provide basic protection to their own people, to what extent they will integrate with the international community. But anyhow, I think for the sake of interest of local people and for the whole region, also for the longer geopolitical stability, Afghani government will try to integrate to the modern international system.
Okay, Nurbullah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Syrian President Ahmed AlShara is on a working visit to Azerbaijan today, following his first meeting with President Ilham Aliyev at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum in April this year. The two leaders have actually met, held comprehensive talks at the delegation level as well. Baku has consistently reaffirmed its support for Syria's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And since the change of power in Damascus last December, several high-level Azerbaijani delegations led by the Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy Foreign Minister have undertaken visits to the country. There's also been quiet talk in diplomatic circles of Azerbaijan playing a crucial role in facilitating normalization between Turkey and Israel on Syrian soil. Joining me now in the studio are our very own Orkan Amashov, and we'll also be joined by Arthur Block, Editor-in-Chief of Liberium. Orkan, welcome to the studio once again.
Thank you, good to see you.
It's always great having you.
Thank you.
Now, are you surprised by the timing of this visit, Orkan?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, Tilak. I'm not surprised at all, because we have been anticipating this meeting since early April, since Antalya Diplomacy Forum, when President Aliyev met with the interim leader of Syria. Since then, and the idea of him visiting Azerbaijan was initially proposed back then, in view of Azerbaijan's foreign policy regarding Syria since 8th of December 2024, in view of the level of coordination that we observe in the way Azerbaijan and Turkey interact regarding Syria, and in view of the general policy revolving around bringing Syria back from the cold, back in from the cold, I am not at all surprised. It was a matter of timing. It wasn't a question of if but when, and I'm not surprised at all it's taking place. Azerbaijan is playing an active role now in the Middle East and Central Asia, in particular bearing in mind the coordination level between Baku and Ankara, and the general situation involving Syria, in particular after the visit of US President Donald Trump into the Gulf region, wherein he actually had a personal contact with Syrian leader. I'm not at all surprised this meeting taking place. I was surprised by the news when I heard about it, because I don't think that on the grapevine the news about Ahmed AlShara, interim president of Syria, visiting Azerbaijan, been sort of vigorously circulating for the past couple of days. Absolutely not. There was an element of surprise, but it's not surprising at all that he's visiting Azerbaijan today.
Okay. All right. I've just been updated that we don't have our guest online yet, Arthur Block, but as soon as we do, hopefully, if we overcome technical issues, we'll ask him to join in the conversation. What role is Azerbaijan playing in Syria today?
So let's see what Azerbaijan has been doing in Syria. After 8th of December, there have been a couple of, as you mentioned in your introduction, a couple of high-level visits. Delegations led by Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy Foreign Minister. Azerbaijan is set to play an important role in terms of a serious rebuilding efforts in terms of infrastructure projects. And also, of course, in terms of some energy projects. It has been reported that the question of the export of Azerbaijan's natural gas to Syria is also under discussion. Of course, Europe is Azerbaijan's biggest market. Middle East is not going to replace Europe as Azerbaijan's primary focus, but Israel, for example, is using Azerbaijani energy resources. Why not Syria? This is one particular element, and also it's widely. Also, there's another element there. As you know, Syria is currently considering joining the Abraham Accords. Azerbaijan has got absolutely fantastic relations with Israel. This another component to be borne in mind. And plus, I think, although before the 8th of December, some of the actions taken by Israel and Turkey had sort of cumulatively led to the toppling of the government of Bashar al-Assad. After 8th of December, there had been very palpable and perceptible tensions on the ground between Israel and Turkey, and Azerbaijan, a country which has strong, deeply entrenched relations with Turkey, in particular solidified by virtue of the Shusha Declaration signed back in 2021, and also vital strategic partnership with Israel, was particularly perturbed by this fact, and Azerbaijan played an important role, as you mentioned in your introduction, by the way, in terms of making sure that the situation there would never reach the confliction point between Israel and Turkey, and there have been some talks thanks to Azerbaijan's good offices. So Azerbaijan is very, very much concerned about the relations there between Israel and Turkey, and Azerbaijan is doing its level best to make sure that in Syria their relations are in congruence.
Okay, and are there any concrete plans, economic or infrastructure projects currently underway between the two countries? You mentioned clearly that Azerbaijan will be looking to support Syria in terms of rebuilding and infrastructure projects as well. Anything tangible that we know?
Yeah, before coming to the point about tangible projects, Azerbaijan, of course, have always been, as a nation, Azerbaijan supporting Syria's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So there will be enough, I guess, diplomatic support in the first place, supporting the current government diplomatically. This is going to be one layer of espousal coming from Baku. As you know, before the 8th of December, relations between Damascus and Baku had not been at all brilliant, because of the support shown by the Bashar al-Assad to the separatism in Karabakh, and due to some other elements, due to the claims about the export of terrorism to Azerbaijan by the government of Bashar al-Assad. So relations have been very, very problematic, and therefore this new age, the post-8th of December age, is bringing some new hopes, and those hopes need to be properly understood and put into practice. Apart from diplomatic support, I expect investment in Syria, in particular in construction business. I think that that's going to be one element. On humanitarian level, I expect Azerbaijan being involved in efforts revolving around rebuilding efforts. That's going to be another, of course, element. And of course, the energy sector, I think, is very, very key. Turkey and Azerbaijan are going to play an important role in Syria. Turkey is an essential, indispensable partner of the current government. And also, I would like specifically mention the situation involving the outlawed PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party, which, as you know, the leader of this organization back in February of this year, they called on the members to lay down arms, and that sort of disbandment of this organization is taking place. We also know that in northeastern Syria, the area controlled by SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, and which is recognized almost unanimously by everybody as a sort of an offshoot of PKK, is now being integrated as a region into central government. This is an important effort and an important ambition to solidify national unity in Syria, and any Azerbaijani investment in this region, economic projects, would boost Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and future prospects in the region and beyond.
Okay, so it's clear that alongside Azerbaijan, Syria needs these immediate countries in the region more than any of the countries need Syria. But for argument's sake, with the investments, the assistance on the humanitarian level, as you mentioned, infrastructure projects, rebuilding efforts, how can Syria what can Syria bring to the table for Azerbaijan once they reach that certain level and gain momentum in terms of proper governance once again in the country?
That's a very, very good question indeed, Dilek, because it's a reciprocal arrangement, of course, and it's a foreign policy wherein you have to get the best out of that relationship. Each single party is going to follow the self-same principle. From Azerbaijan's perspective, you are building your geopolitical clout and presence by means of building your relations with the respective countries. What Azerbaijan can get this relationship? In order to understand what Azerbaijan can actually acquire by means of having close interaction with the government in Damascus, we need to look at what Azerbaijan was actually losing before the 8th of December by not having good, functional, constructive relations with the government in Damascus. There was no relation. That limited Azerbaijan's outreach in the Middle East. That effectively meant that any particular project, economic project involving gas pipelines or the export of oil by tankers was, that sort of element was incredibly limited by virtue of not having any sort of relationship. And also there was a danger emanating from Syria. So Azerbaijan's benefit in the context of this meeting and its possible ramifications can be understood in two fundamental ways. One is making sure that your outreach is as extensive as possible. Your presence, your involvement, your economic presence is guaranteed. That is a major gain for Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan is a country which needs to be understood in the context of the former Karabakh conflict. For 3 decades, this nation had been fundamentally perturbed by the fact of having this internal issue, the issue of separatism, actually the issue of illegal occupation by another country. Despite all of those economic projects and the export of gas resources to Europe and having this sort of foreign policy, multivectoral foreign policy, by virtue of the Karabakh conflict, Azerbaijan was so limited in its foreign policy ambitions. And after 2020, and in particular after September 2023, when this Karabakh issue was completely taken out of the agenda, Azerbaijan is pursuing a very bold foreign policy, wherein, of course, regional ownership is taking center stage. Azerbaijan is building a new regional order in this region, the South Caucasus. It's a sort of a rule-maker country, and a peace deal, Turkish-Armenian normalization, effectively will create a new regional order here. Azerbaijan is actively engaged in Central Asia as being a key enabler of the Middle Corridor. And also we shouldn't forget about Middle East. And by virtue of having this allied interaction with Turkey, by virtue of having very good and functional relations with the regional government in northern Iraq, Azerbaijan is naturally expected to play an important role in Syria as well. And this moment is being particularly amplified by virtue of Azerbaijan's strategic partnership with Israel. It's about outreach, it's about influence, it's about boosting trade. Because after all, when you have all of those links together, cumulatively, that element of connectivity will boost your trade. And trade means, of course, financial resources, it means outreach, it means prosperity. And I think that Azerbaijan, as any other country in the region, is being very rational.
Okay, so I've been updated once again. We haven't been able to connect with Arthur. So just to tie it up with you, Orkan, let's bring it back to today. We know that talks have taken place, both on a delegation level, comprehensive bilateral talk, well, one-on-one talks, I imagine, as well. We don't have any information as yet, or clarity rather. What do you anticipate the two leaders would have discussed at this stage? Do you think there'd be any signing of agreements, or just generally, what's your analysis?
Well, as you said, Dilek, we know very little. We knew that this meeting would take place at some point very soon. We definitely knew that. We had been anticipating this meeting since Antalya Diplomacy Forum. There is no element of surprise as such. We might have been surprised this morning when we heard this news, but after all, this, as somebody who was keeping a pretty eye on what's happening in the region, I can tell you with absolute confidence that this was not an active rumor circulating on the grapevine. It was an active rumor. This is one thing, but we're not surprised by the fact of the meeting. I expect, on the basis of what Azerbaijan could reasonably be expected to be interested about and what the interests of current Syrian government are, I would expect some sort of declaration about investment, about infrastructure projects. We could see some provision related to Azerbaijan's natural gas exports to Syria, and I expect something of that nature. This is not a state visit. This is a working visit. They differ, of course. Naturally, state visit will take place at some point soon when the right circumstances are established. That will take place at some point later. Currently, what is absolutely clear to me and to everybody else is that Syria is being brought in from the cold. US is playing its role in this process, but of course, major players are regional actors. And those regional actors involve Turkey, Israel, some others, and also, of course, Azerbaijan.
Okay. Orkan, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your insight and your time. That's all we have time for on the program today. Thanks for watching.